Hi, good morning again. So what I want to do now is I want to work my way through each of the three FRQs. And this first video is going to be on question 3, which is the question I think you should start with. And I'm going to basically follow our model and do this the way that we have done it. However, in the test preview, because I want to do it in real Bluebook, in the test preview, the Q3 prompt is one that we have seen before. So one thing I would like to do is I'm going to sort of come over here and put this here, and we're going to use this as our prompt just for this one, okay? And then I've also put our checklist down here, which hopefully, you know, when you first walk in to take the test, or as your break is ending, what you do is you just start, writing out like, your method, which does not have to be as detailed as mine is. Just whatever it is you want to remember about how to do this. Okay, and when I look at the method, it's going to say here, choose 4 to 5 texts and concepts that you want to use. And I'm supposed to do that before I even read the prompt. So I want to show you the thinking, right? And so I thought what I would do, rather than just use my favorites or use the ones that would work, because I do know this prompt, is I'm going to randomize. This is just like the prompt list. And what I thought I would do is I would just randomize all of these, and I'm going to take the first 6, maybe 7. And the reason why I'm doing 6 or 7 is because when they're random, they won't necessarily be good. But I do want to show you that, as long as you know 4 or 5 that you like that are good, you'll have plenty. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra leeway. So we're going to go down here and we're going to randomize the range. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll do that. Oh man, I almost had Mary Wollstonecraft. And I'm going to take these and I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to paste them there. Actually, no, let me redo that. Control CV. Okay, that way it's basically like I'm going to work out of this bank so that I can do this. And what do we have? We have having a sense of belonging encourages resilience to adversity. Okay, we have the American identity is shaped by pioneers. Grades result in, no, okay, that really was like that. Okay, grades result in, so which is Alfie Cohen. And we have Night. And we also have Teddy again about hard work. We have the ones that walk away from Omelis. And we have utilitarianism. Okay, so plenty of stuff there. All right, so I'm going to start with that. And then we'll go over here and it says, read the prompt and restate the original claim that you're responding to. So I'm going to come up here, and this one doesn't actually have a quote. This is from 2022. Many people spend long hours trying to achieve perfection in their personal or professional lives. Similarly, people often demand perfection from others, creating expectations that may be challenging to live up to. In contrast, some people think perfection is not attainable or desirable. Write an essay that argues your position on the value of striving for perfection. Okay, so I want to restate that original claim. There's not really a quote, so I don't really have to do that in a really big way, but I'm going to do this over here. I'm going to say something like, and actually, I want to make this big. Isn't there a way to make this like the whole screen? Oh, it's here, sorry. Okay, most of the screen. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say something like the topic. It's not really, we'll just make the claim one direction because there's not really a specific claim there. Something like perfection or striving for perfection is a worthy, or is a, I'm going to keep it very simple, positive trait or positive goal. Okay, like it's a thing people should do. And so I'm just saying it really straightforward, and there's that's not necessarily my claim, but that's like the claim I'm supposed to defend or rebut. Okay, so I've done that. Now, where's my, I have too many tabs. Okay, so that's not the tabs I want. Hold on, I want the one that's just this, yeah. Okay, so now it says choose 4 to 5 texts or concepts you want to use. We have perfection to the original claim, which is going to be that striving for perfection is a positive goal. And then I'm going to go look through these and I'm going to say, what does each say about that original claim? Okay, so we know that we're doing something with striving for perfection. I'm thinking about striving. I see having a sense of belonging encourages resilience to adversity. I don't love that. Like, I would really have to start doing a lot of work. I could make that work, but it would be a lot of work. But if I come down here and I think about the pioneers, I don't know if they strove for perfection, but they sure did. They strove for a better life. They were not content with what they had. So that's a very strong possibility. Here we have education writer Cohen claims that grades result in less student learning because they encourage students to be less creative, take fewer risks, and work to a lower standard. So here I would probably say something like perfection meaning what? Perfect grades actually come at the cost of not being perfect in the cost of like learning less. So, you know, it depends on what type of perfect like you're trying to be. Like if you're trying to have perfect grades, it's actually hurting you. But if you're more concerned with learning perfectly and learning the most that you can, and so therefore you're willing to sacrifice your grades, that would feel positive. I don't know that night is really going to work. Like nothing just jumps to mind, and I've already got 2 that I really like, so I'm just gonna, I would get rid of night, and I'm just gonna put it up there for now. All right, then we have Teddy Roosevelt again. All men should work hard, even if they do not need to survive. Again, this is kind of more about the striving part, you know, but striving is a positive trait, making the world like better, like because that's what he said. He told all that stuff about like you should put yourself into science and art and stuff if you can't, if you don't need to work for a living because you're trying to make the world better. And like whether or not that's exactly perfect, but I could talk about like improving, striving towards a more perfect future. Okay, then we have the one short story, The Ones That Walk Away from Armelis, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to think about like, well, where is perfection there? And I think, and this is kind of nice that I got that one too with it. And I think the issue is that the perfection, right, is that perfection for the many, because it is a perfect society. Like that's the whole point. That leads to, like suffering for the few. Okay, I should have been typing all this in the Bluebook because I won't be able to paste it in. All right, that's okay. So perfection for the many leads to suffering for the few. You know, is that so? It's almost like the striving is selfish. And if I was doing this, not trying to show you guys how to do this, I would not be like writing out all this much maybe until I was ready to write more about it. I'm just like spitball. This is just the spitballing phase. And then we have utilitarianism as an ethical principle that states that the ethical thing to do is that which does the most good for the most people. So I would probably just tie that into what I already said, and I would be like striving for perfection. As an individual is not good if it leads to more suffering for those around you. Okay, now if you want to pause the video and think for a few minutes about like take your favorite sources and like where would you go with perfection, if you wanted to do Maggie or Allegory of the Cave, which I really wish I'd got because that would work great, or you could talk about Lockhart's Lament and about notation and focusing on perfect notation instead of like actually learning. And we could talk about Mary Wollstonecraft and how women are not allowed to like strive to be better and strive for perfection. They're just supposed to, or the only perfection, you know, they're perfect when they're young and beautiful, and that's just going to decay, and how not having access to perfection has hurt them. You could definitely talk about JFK and, you know, striving to go to the moon. So notice that I'm using the striving as much as the perfection, because like perfection is very narrow, and if we just kind of expanded a little bit to talk about like trying to be the best you can be, I think this is a lot easier. You could talk about, though nobody apparently wants to, you could talk about, because none of y'all put that in your tier list. You could talk about the sunrise ceremony or the bullet ants, and how putting yourself in these like intentionally like impossible situations to try to become like the perfect adult, you know, through trial, um, is useful. But you could also talk about Mark Rober and how, um, um, when people saw that they lost that perfect score, they just didn't want to try it all anymore, because if they couldn't be perfect, then what was the point? So I mean, like, and this is just me. I am glancing at my list over here on the other screen, but of like topics. But like, this is what I'm talking about. You could just almost anything works. You could just start spitballing things. Okay, so now I have this and I have that, and I'm going to come over here and we have striving for perfection is a positive goal. That would be a claim, but like I think I'm probably going to end up going in a different direction. So I want to like group mine, and it won't let me copy paste, will it? Nope. Okay, I should have done it differently. All right, so just like looking at these, the ones I have left, like I know I want to use Le Guin. Le Guin, like the perfection for some, you know, comes at the cost of others. Like that's pretty peak. And I think I probably want to use Roosevelt. And like this country was built on the idea of challenging oneself. And I could probably talk about both speeches with that, you know. And then I might also want to talk about, well, I mean, if I'm doing Le Guin, I'm probably going to bring up utilitarianism. And Roosevelt, I could probably talk about both of them. Perfection. And then I would probably, just kind of looking at my list over here. I really like the grades thing, honestly. Cohen, people think having perfect grades is the most important thing. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of look at these, and I've got 4 if you say 2 Roosevelt speeches, which I think would be fine, or 4 if you count utilitarianism. And but what I'm going to notice is that like these two, Cohen and Le Guin, are both kind of about the negative sides of utilitarianism. So I'm going to put those together. And down here, so apparently I can use copy paste. Can I use the dragging? Yeah, I can. Okay. I can use copy paste here, so that's nice. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say like this on the other hand is more positive. Okay, this idea of challenging yourself. So those would probably be my paragraphs. So what have I done? I've got, all right, I need to write I need to write up my stuff. So let me do that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write my explanations now that I kind of know which ones I want and which ones I've narrowed it down to the ones I want to use. So I would probably say something like Ursula, and if you can't remember somebody's name, nobody cares. And you could certainly just have a last name and nobody would care. I mean, these are drafts. And if you just said a science fiction author wrote a story, that'd be fine too. Le Guin, or even just in the short story. Le Guin's short story, the ones who, and if you misspell some of this or get this a little bit wrong, nobody cares, a walk away from Omelis. And I just need to tell like the backstory, right? Just like what happened. So I'm going to say something like, Le Guin's short story, The Ones Who Walks from Omelis, like recounts, or like it's really like a fable almost, right? Is a, describes a mythical city where everyone appears, and I want to use the word perfect because I know I'm going towards that whole perfect thing, right? Appears to live a perfect life. People are happy and healthy, and people are happy and healthy and spend their days, frolicking in festivals. No one is hungry, or it's like it's a beautiful city filled with like music and laughter, like that. Okay. However, the reader learns that all that happiness, it comes from, actually I don't want to say that happiness, I want to say learns that this perfect happiness comes from, or it's like relies on the utter misery of one little child forever suffering. Okay, so that's just like that first level explanation, and then maybe I need to go a little further. I need to like connect it to this idea of perfect suffering, and this idea about striving for perfection. So how does this like connect to that? And I would say something like, often people who fight to perfect their own lives do so at the cost of others. For example, and we have those, right? Often people who fight to perfect their own lives do so at, I don't even need that over there for right now. I can just go like this. Often people who fight to perfect their own lives do so at the cost of others. And I really could kind of just stop there, because I've connected it, I've bridged it. I could come up with other examples. I might want to go a little bit further and say something like, a person's personal quest for perfection should not, interfere with, or should not come at the cost. I've already said that. Perfection is not worth it, or is not, or a person must be evaluated in the context of whatever harm they are doing. And this is where I could just flat out say, utilitarianism argues. Oh, that's really funny though, because then I'm actually making like a pro-utilitarian argument. So we're not going to do that. Okay, like if I said utilitarianism says that you shouldn't do it even if it's good for you, but like that contradicts Omelis, because Omelis says that utilitarianism is morally bankrupt. So I can't use I can't say that utilitarianism supports Omelis, because it's actually the opposite. So I'm not going to do that. But this really, honestly, in this case, I think is enough relevance, because we've already brought in the perfect, right? And so then we've talked more generally about what this allegory is kind of illustrating. And then we've connected it to the value. You really shouldn't do that. So that's fine. And then I've also got Alfie Cohen. So I might say like, Alfie Cohen points out that that people think having perfect grades is the most important part of school, but in reality that hurts their learning. Okay, his argument is that the best way to get perfect grades is to avoid challenges, because because grades are based on not making mistakes. He also points out that grades he points out that working for perfect grades results in students stopping once they have reached that goal. Once they have an A, they don't doing anything else, doing additional work. Once they have, actually I'm going to say that perfect 100. See, I'm trying to get that word perfect in as much as I can. Once they have that perfect 100, they don't, anything else feels like a waste. In this case, the narrow idea of what it means to be perfect limits perfect, and anything else feels like a waste. I would say it would be better to put that time into getting a perfect grade in some other class. In this case, the narrow idea of what it means to be perfect and putting perfect grades above all results in students who do less, learn less, and who do less and learn less because they are striving towards a perfect that really doesn't matter. Okay, so again, I've got perfect way to avoid challenges. Grades are based on not making mistakes. He points out that working for perfect grades results in students stopping once they've reached the goal. Once they have that perfect 100, anything else feels like a waste. And again, in both of these cases, when I was reading, you might have been like, ooh, I know someone who does that. You could talk about that. When I do this, all of you were probably like, ooh, I know somebody who does that. You could talk about that. You better put that time into some other class. This narrow idea of what it means to be perfect and putting perfect grades above all results in students, and don't do this bolding on your actual essay. This is me just trying to show you how much perfect I got in there, who learn less and less because they are striving towards a perfect that doesn't really matter. And here it's in quotes, and I got striving in there too, because remember that's part of it. Okay, so now we have 2 of our 3 really written up. So now I've got Roosevelt, and I want to talk about what Roosevelt said. So I'm going to put Teddy on there because there's been more than one. Teddy Roosevelt, former president, former U.S. president, and all around bad. No, I shouldn't say that. Okay, former U.S. president argued that the U.S. was unique in that it was built by people who constantly strove to make their lives better. He pointed out that most Americans were the descendants of, actually in his time period, were either pioneers or the descendants of pioneers. And he suggested that legacy left us with a tradition of always trying to make things better. Okay, so I would just say something. I mean, honestly, that's probably enough. Okay, Roosevelt. I could say something. Roosevelt attributed this focus on or attributed this like history, or this background, this pioneering background. I'm not saying attributed. Roosevelt credited our country's like success to this identity shaped by generations of pioneers. Okay, so what we have there is a, that's fine. And now I've got to connect it to perfection. In this case, never being satisfied with the status quo and always seeking to get closer to perfection. Perfection resulted in a stronger, in a country, that became a world, superpower. Something like that. Okay, so, and again, this isn't even like necessarily what I'm going to argue, but this is like how he's thinking about it, that we were always seeking to get closer to perfection is kind of the connection there. Okay, so now I've got these three. And then I'm supposed to group them. So I did jump ahead on that because I could already tell in my head where I was going to go. But if I was going to do that, so I've chosen my 4 to 5 texts. I've read the prompt. I've asked that. I've narrowed it down. I've written my basic and advanced explanations. Now I've arranged it kind of like these are going to be, this is going to be a paragraph about, and then that's going to be a paragraph. And now I got to think about my topic sentences. So in these cases, it's pretty negative, right? In these cases, these are people who either don't care about what perfection does to others, or they don't really think about what perfect really means. They're just trying to meet perfect based on kind of this arbitrary system. They're going after kind of the easy perfect. So these are cases where perfection does harm. And in both cases, I think it's because people are not thinking about like the wider implications or the broader context, if you will, because this is a case of like living in a perfect society, but not recognizing the broader context of like the pain that you're causing. And this is like wanting to have perfect grades, but not thinking about the broader context of what it is that like, well, what are you trying to be perfect on? Like, what's really the point of being in this school? And so like in both of these cases, we have like a type of perfection that is not, maybe that's the best way to put it, really. This is why you got to talk through this stuff in your head. We're striving for a perfection that's not really worth having. So maybe that's my topic sentence. Sometimes people strive for a type of perfection, or strive for perfection without really considering. Actually, no, I want to make this more like what we should do, right? So I'm going to say something like, I'm going to say something like, the quest for perfection isn't always worth the cost. Okay, so now I've got a topic sentence. Okay, and then I'm going to have, this is my example, and then I'm just going to hit enter so that now make sure that this is all run together. So like go like that, and yeah, so there. All right, so now this is basically my whole first paragraph. That's a pretty long paragraph. And then I'll come down here, and here I'm just talking about Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm talking about how seeking perfection can leave an impact on a people or a nation or something like that. So I might say something like, the quest for perfection is central, has played a role in shaping the United States. Okay, and if I had a ton of time, I would also do the toil. I would say in another speech, Teddy Roosevelt talked about the importance of hard work, because that's also about striving for perfection, but I don't really have time. Okay, so here I've got the quest for perfection has played a role in shaping the United States and explaining why. And down here, the quest for perfection isn't always worth the cost. And I think what I would want to do is I really think this paragraph should go first. And the reason why I think that is just that, like, first we're going to talk about, like, this is what people think it is and, like, why maybe it's good. But then actually, this is down here. And I might even come down here and do however, because that's the way to do that. Okay, so then I've done this. And no, wait, where's my... Oh, that's a different... That was me looking around. Where's my... Here it is. Okay, so write topic sentences for each paragraph that make a claim. Okay, so these are claims about the explained what it is going to present. Oh, I also need to... Well, no, I'm just going to put an extra space there so it's clear that these are paragraphs, and I'm going to indent that. And I'm going to indent that because that looks better. Okay. And now I need a thesis. So the quest for perfection has played a role in shaping the United States, but it isn't always worth the cost. So I think my thesis is going to be something like striving for perfection, can be a positive goal if, okay, and we're saying something like unless... because remember, it's like because, unless, or until. Okay, so maybe I want to say something like unless the perfection, all right. Actually, I would probably say something, but only if that perfection is, but only if the cost of perfection is worth, no, it would be only if the perfection you gain, a person gains is worth the cost they or others pay. Okay, so like this. And of course, if I had more time, I would really like to talk about how this also came at a huge cost in terms of imperialism and indigenous peoples and exploiting other groups in order to get the labor to expand. Like, I actually have some deep disagreements with this paragraph, but I'm writing a draft, and so we're just going to go with it. Okay, so, but if you have time, that's the kind of thing you want to do. I just think this video is getting kind of long, and y'all probably don't want to listen to how I do that. All right, so what we have here is now we have a thesis, okay, and we have these things. And then we look at our checklist, and we've written our thesis statement. Now we have to write tiebacks at the end of each paragraph, connecting it to the thesis. So if I go over here, striving for perfection can be a positive goal, but only if the perfection a person gains is worth the cost they or others pay. I might say something like, in the case of pioneers trying to build a better life for themselves and eventually a better nation, that quest for perfection was positive, or something like that. So I've connected it back to it can be a positive goal. Again, if I had more time, I probably would have gone with I would have probably gone straight into my however and talked about it there, but whatever. Okay, so there we have our tieback number 1. Don't italicize it. I'm just doing that. I'm just doing the bolding in italics so y'all can see. Okay, now we're going to come down here, and I still want to tie back if it's worth the cost they or others pay. So, and I've got 2 examples, which honestly makes the tieback a lot easier to write. So I'm going to say something like, in this case, in these cases, the quest for perfection may have benefited, well, actually, the second group, it doesn't even benefit them. In these cases, the quest for perfection led to terrible consequences, either for the poor child who took the abuse, who was abused, or for the students themselves who learned, did not, achieve, their best person, like who did not become the best version of themselves, and instead had perfect like transcripts that didn't even matter after they graduated or something like that. So again, now it's like that's why it's not working. Okay, and now I'm done. This would be a 140 for sure because I've done a good job explaining my things. Um, it might be a 141. I think that it would. I think had I taken the time to talk about how even in here it really wasn't worth the cost, it would definitely be. But I think I would get the 141 just on um, addressing the tensions built into the system because this is sort of addressing that it's not always as straightforward. So yeah, this is a fine essay, and that's just what you do. Oh, and the last step is to check formatting, but I've kind of been doing that as I go. So I could indent that, or I could make it worse. Okay, so there's the essay. If you want to, I can scroll it if you want to read it, but basically I'll do this, and then I'm gonna look at this paragraph if you want to pause it, and then you look at this paragraph if you want to pause it. So that's just how this is done. That's a good essay. You could do that in 35 minutes and then move on to your next one. Thank you very much, and hopefully later today or tomorrow you'll get the other two essays.